Today's topic is a really interesting one because it's something that we get asked about a lot, which is doing jewelry repairs and remodeling or kind of repurposing people's jewelry because they're kind of quite linked. And we have the wonderful April Dace joining us. Hi, April.
Hi, hello everyone.
Yes, and April is a goldsmith. She's a jeweler. She's one of the mentors and one of the teachers as well on our programs. And she does a mixture of things, don't you, April? You do commissions, you do collections, but you also do kind of repairs and remodeling. So thank you so much for coming and sharing a bit with us today about your experience of that. Just going to come and say hi to a few people. We also have Anna Campbell who is here, who is kind of helping with the tech side of things, letting everyone in and, helping out in the chat. So welcome, Anna, as well. So yes, Anna's here from Edinburgh. Rebecca's here from Ireland. Lovely to see April again. Yvonne is joining from San Diego, California. Welcome, Yvonne. Lovely to see you. We've got Chris from Surrey in the UK. Claire says, hi all. We have AMP2, which I'm sure is not your name, but from the New Forest near Southampton in the UK. You're not too far from me. We've got Helen. Claire's in Bristol. Claire says hi everyone from Kent, and Nicole from Spain. So yeah, keep coming in, keep saying hi. It's just nice to see you. Brilliant. So it's a big topic today, repairs and remodeling. But I thought maybe we could start with, and please, this is your bench tip session. So this is for you guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and me and April will have a chat about them and go through them. But while we're waiting for you guys to kind of think about some questions you might have, April, do you just want to tell us a bit of an introduction about what are some common jewelry repairs? What are the ones that you'll get a lot of, and maybe we can talk through some of those to begin with.
Yeah, of course. So probably the two that come to mind first off as the most common repairs would be ring sizing or chain repairs. So ring sizing, it's not necessarily a repair unless a band is broken, but it's a really common thing that we get in sort of the repair workshop. So sizing up or down, and any kind of ring, whether it's stone set or plain, wedding rings, all manner of rings. And then chain repairs, they just seem to come in all the time because I think they're just an everyday item, aren't they? And dogs or children or catching it on things, so we get a lot of those. So yeah, they're sort of the two most common ones. And then sort of above that you then find claws on gemstones and things like that tend to wear down over time. So the actual settings that the stones are set in need a lot of work over a good few years after, a loving lifetime of wear. So rebuilding those claws and resetting stones and things like that.
Absolutely. I was actually doing a course the other week, and I was sat in a jewelry shop that does repairs, and it was fascinating because loads of people kept coming in, and the guy was looking at them and he was like, if you don't fix this, you're going to lose the diamond, you're going to lose the stone. And they were so shocked. They were like, oh, I didn't realize it was the claws had got so low. And I think a lot of customers, consumers aren't always aware as well of they brought it in for something else, and then he'd look at it and be like, you can't wear this again, like you could lose the piece. So
Yeah.
yeah, that must be quite a common one. So maybe starting with the rings, because I guess that's one of the most common. Is that something achievable? What kind of level do we need to be at, and what kind of skills do we need to have to start thinking about offering some of these repairs? Because I think with repairs, some of them seem like they'll be easier and they're a lot more challenging, and some of them seem like they'll be really scary and actually they're definitely achievable. So maybe we can talk through kind of what level we'd need to be at to do those different ones.
Absolutely. Well, I think definitely ring sizing and chain repairs are completely achievable for, your sort of beginner slash intermediate level. And you've kind of got to detach it away from the word repair almost, if you can, and just say, do you know what? I'm a jeweler. I know what I'm doing with my metal. I can solder, I can use my pliers and kind of almost just breaking it down and just saying, okay, this is just two links that need to go back together, or I'm just going to cut through here and put a piece in. I suppose it's one of those things, and I think as we learn, especially on the diplomas and things, you just need to be shown these things, and then we almost go, oh, duh, of course that's how you do it. It's almost obvious once you've been shown how. But yeah, what I mean by that is that actually it is a really simple thing that we can do. Um, yeah, and I mean, in terms of gemstones on rings, that's where it gets a bit tricky. But again, that's just sort of looking into that and getting the knowledge about how you go about soldering around certain gemstones. So diamonds and rubies and sapphires are absolutely fine. You can put heat near those. You wouldn't want to blast it. But you can put heat near those for soldering. And then the obvious sort of softer stones such as opal, pearl, peridot, things like that. You just have to take more care by using something like a what's it called? Technoflux, which we use that a lot in the diploma, but you basically just smother it. Or you go down the laser welding route. That's quite a common route to do, which I know we don't all have laser welders and things, but if you've got a specific repair that requires laser, you can outsource. So yeah. But in
Yeah,
terms of doing things at home, definitely, yeah, we've got all the tools that are needed for these repairs. So yeah, it's definitely something that's achievable.
brilliant. Great. Thank you. We do have some questions. So I'm just going to ask through some of those. Not sure if they're in order, so apologies if they're not. But there's one here from Rebecca who says, how often should the claws or holding stones be serviced and or checked? Is there like a
Question, yeah, it's a bit how long is a piece of string, but at the same time, it's always good to kind of advise customers maybe to bring your piece of jewelry in for sort of a check over maybe once a year or something if it's a brand new piece. If somebody's come to you and you've had a look at it and you're thinking, oh gosh, that looks a bit thin, you can, but they're okay. You can always advise them to come back every 6 months or something. And then you're bringing people back to you for, a service. Yeah, they're sort of coming through your door, so to speak. So it's always nice to be able to offer that service. Platinum is a lot more harder wearing, so you'll find that those will last a lot longer, although they still do wear. For example, I've done claw work on rings that's in platinum that have probably been, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20 years old, and they've only just started to wear. So, and it also depends on the chunkiness of the claws as well. So if you've got quite a bit of metal there already, a bigger claw, that will last longer than some of the much finer sort of micro type claws. So all this repair stuff kind of really works into if you're designing as well, and sort of forward thinking about how you can design and make things sort of longer lasting for your customer too. So it's quite interesting how it goes together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know like when I when I was in this shop, I think that people bringing stuff in, it'd been like a decade since they'd had them. They never even thought about checking them.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think if you sell someone like an engagement ring or like a really bespoke piece, like you said, it's really nice to stay in touch with them and maybe try and touch base with them every year or
yeah,
2 to 3 years. I know some places will offer like a free polishing service just as a way to kind of like have contact with customers and often they become repeat customers and yeah, kind of feel like you're there for the journey of their piece, not just the beginning, which is a nice kind of thing you mentioned. Um,
yeah. And
oh,
also I think it depends on their profession or their sort of everyday life as well, because if you've got somebody that is, a builder or by trade or something, it all kind of works around that, and they're going to be much more heavy-handed than somebody who may be at a desk, so yeah, it's kind of working around that too, and sort of discovering what they're going to be doing with this jewelry, and then also perhaps then advising, if you want to prolong the wear of your jewelry, then or avoid this, that, the other, then perhaps take it off while you're working, or that sort of thing. So yeah, it's getting the whole picture.
Yeah, we all have different definitions of wear and tear.
Yes, definitely.
If we go rock climbing or whatever.
Yeah.
There's another question from Yvonne. Thanks, Yvonne. He says, I always shield away from both custom projects and repairs because of the emotional attachment to the pieces. Two questions, please. How do you assure that you'll do your best but not overpromise? So we can do that one. And then, do you have a standard checklist of elements to inspect when deciding if a piece is worth the risk of attempting a repair? And I feel like they're kind of linked. So if somebody were to bring a repair to you, April, like, yeah, how do you kind of manage the expectations of the customer? And also, how do you choose whether you're willing to take on the repair?
I think it's just about being completely honest and transparent from the very moment you look at the piece and communicate with the customer. So, one thing you will most certainly need if you are going to be doing more repairs, and especially on the finer stuff, is a loop. Um, and that's just so that you can look up much closer at sort of claws, or even solder joins and things like that. And basically, what I would do is inspect the whole piece in front of the customer, or if someone sent me something, I will mention that I'm going to look over the whole piece first. Even if it has just come in for what they think is a ring sizing, I could look at it and say, oh gosh, yeah, all those claws need doing, and I can't do any ring sizing or soldering or anything until we treat those claws. So yeah, it's just about being honest. And I think people appreciate the honesty rather than kind of skirting around it. And they will value that you're an experienced jeweler looking at these things. And like you said before, Jess, about the customer who could have walked out and lost their gemstone, they're going to appreciate it much more that you've had a look at it and made you aware of it, rather than just let you walk out. And yeah, so I think it's just, yeah, being honest, looking over the whole piece. Um, and if any work does need doing, just letting them know about it. And also just making them feel comfortable that you're looking after that piece, and you're already kind of doing that by looking over it already, if that makes sense. You're
Yeah.
already making them feel like yeah, you're trying to do the best for them.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed from watching customers over the years with repairs is they're so happy when you repair their jewelry, because it's almost like they're more happy than buying a new piece of jewelry, because it's usually been a frustration for a while that they're like, oh, I've had this in my drawer and I've been nervous to wear it because, the link's too big or whatever, or my ring's falling off or it's getting too tight. And then especially it's something that they've loved so much enough that they've come back and they're willing to spend money to get it repaired. And this is something I didn't really realize before, before sort of exploring repairs more. And I just think that's such a rewarding thing for the
Yeah.
jeweler, when someone's like, oh my gosh, thank you. I've, really wanted to wear this and now it's going to give me a new lease of life. Or
It's like
yeah.
make do and mend kind of mentality in a way, isn't it? And a lot of these repairs may have been passed down, or they've got a huge sentimental attachment to them, a sentimental meaning. So yeah, I think I've forgotten what I was talking about then. Sorry,
That's
Jeff.
okay. We were
Yeah,
just talking about, yeah, just how much they mean, I suppose, to the
yeah.
customer. It's
Yeah, so they might have found this piece, and like you say, in a drawer, and it's been hidden away in a drawer for ages, but it's not the right size. For example, my nan passed me a ring, a garnet ring, and it is still sat in the drawer just because I haven't had time to size it. But imagine finding that and thinking, I just want to be able to wear it. It's got that huge sentimental connection. And when you actually do when you offer that service for somebody and you do a good job and they know that you've done a good job, it is an amazing feeling. And I think repairs, um, they just go alongside sometimes your sort of jewelry practice, because it is a service that you can offer, and often you'll find, say you specialize in wedding rings. You might have somebody come to you to commission a wedding ring, and then they bring half their jewelry box of repairs that have been sat there, and say, oh, can you just do this, can you just do that? So, and they there's almost an expectation, I think, um in whether you choose to sort of go with that and set those boundaries and say, yes, I can do it, or no, that's not something I do, that's absolutely fine.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice if you can offer that service. You might even have someone come to you with a simple chain repair, and then they end up commissioning a big piece. So yeah, it's quite a nice additional service, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, it's great customer service, I think, and it's just a great kind of rapport to build with people, like you said, because if they give you one of their treasured pieces and you fix it and they've got a new lease of life, that's a good feeling, and they're much more likely to think, oh, actually, I want another piece and I trust this person, and kind of feel looked after in a way, which I think is important. I'll just mention there was a metal clay question, but our Anna has answered it because Anna is our resident metal clay expert. So thank you for the question and for the answer, but that's all in the chat. Um, there's another one from Claire who says, how do you tell if a setting is too thin? Is there a guide for this in different metals?
So it will start to look flat. So, for example, if you had, let's talk about claws. So, if you had a rounded claw, um, even from the top, but also from the side, you'll notice that as it wears, and you'll find this especially on rings that are worn together, they brush together like this over the years, and it will create like a flat, and that flat will be quite dull. Um, so, and once you look under magnification, you'll see that the change in shape, and it almost creates like a facet. That's probably the best way to describe it, actually. Um, and if you can look under magnification, you're going to see how close that facet is to the gemstone. And it's as you do more, you'll experience more as to how, or sort of imagining how the claw would have been when it was first made, and so you use that as a bit of a guide. But when it's like dangerously thin, it almost has like a papery appearance, and it sort of wafers and does that. But also, if you've got a heavily stone set ring, like a cluster, for example, a claw set cluster, you might find that some of the tips of the claws have completely sheared off. So you'll have the underneath of the claw, then the stones kind of sat on top of it, and what the claw would have been coming over the top is just completely gone. That's something to look for, but it might have additional claws around it to keep that stone in. That's probably why you haven't noticed that there's an issue there. So yeah, particularly looking around the outside edges of a piece of jewelry where the stones are set, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
That makes sense. And I guess in a way, it's like when we're making jewelry, if we made something and it seemed really like the metal was too thin or it's too flimsy, we probably all in our journey made some pieces where we're like, that's not thick enough or that's not very robust. And you can kind of just tell. It's one of those things that's quite hard to explain, isn't it? But you get a sense of insecurity, like that doesn't feel like that stone is protected enough. And I think, like you said, it probably comes with experience as well, a little bit of intuition around, because you can have quite thin elements, but if it's, I imagine that there's not exactly a chart because it will depend on the individual piece. If some stones, it's kind of in relation to the stone, the thickness of the metal, and just kind of, yeah, whether or not if it's going to get flicked, it's going to ping out at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah.
it.
safe in there. Yeah. I guess in doubt, you could always put it in an ultrasonic.
Yeah, so that's probably one thing to mention. Yeah, if somebody gives you a piece of jewelry, often it can be quite dirty because it's been well loved and worn, and hand creams and things like that. So sometimes actually you can't initially see if there is anything that needs doing, like repair. If something's worn or broken, it might just be underneath a little bit of hand cream and dirt and things. So I always just say to people, um, I'm if it is a dirty piece, then I will just say I'll just give it a bit of a toothbrush first, the old toothbrush trick, because it's a bit gentler than an ultrasonic. Because the last thing you want is to put a stone set ring in the ultrasonic for a customer who hasn't proceeded and you haven't told them what's potentially up with the piece, and then a stone falls out and then you're sort of liable for it. It's a bit like taking your car in for an MOT. That's how I think of repairs. It's like the hidden elements. um, yeah, so yeah, just a gentle toothbrush, or just say to them, I do need to clean this piece before I before I let you know what work is needed, but please be aware that it is a potential that some stones may fall out, and you'll get an inkling for that as to how worn the piece looks initially.
Mm.
If it was a new ring, you obviously wouldn't want to scare them and say that, because it's probably not going to have stones fall out. But if it's an older piece, or it's been well worn and you can see that, then just um, a little word of warning. That's all that's needed.
Yeah, I guess it's all in the communication, isn't it? And I think you get immediate feedback from customers as well, like, oh no, don't do that. I don't, I don't want to risk anything. Or, oh, it's fine, it's been in the drawer for a decade, I'd rather know what the situation is. And then it's almost like a collaboration in that way, I think, with
Absolutely. Yeah.
the repairs. Jessica asks, is it possible to offer repair work remotely, not having a workshop open to the public, and worry that I'm not able to have a look at the piece first? What are your thoughts on this one, April?
I think so. It's something you can say to people, that obviously you'll have to send the piece to me, but I'm more than happy to take a look at it for you. And it depends how you want to structure that business wise, whether you charge a fee for looking at it or whether you don't. And just make them feel comfortable that, okay, you're not charging for me to look at it, but any work that is needed, that this person's really going to look at it and let me know if anything's needed. I suppose there's a whole amount of trust in that. And that might come from, for example, I don't know, just speaking from what I do, my Instagram, I think people kind of trust and know that I'm a real person through my Instagram or a website or something like that. So I think it's making people feel comfortable that, you're not going to take your piece of jewelry in and rip them off and say that it needs all this work. But again, a bit like the car analogy,
Mhm.
it is all based around trust. So it is definitely possible for sure. Um, I think you just need to really have a look at things first before you do any work, and make sure that that is agreed. This is what I've spotted on your piece of jewelry. This is what it needs. This is how much it costs. Would you like to go ahead? And it's a yes or no, or somewhere in between if there's compromise on the repair. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be that you sort of say if someone sends something to you, they'll need to pay for the postage and the return
Yeah.
postage. But obviously if you can't repair it, you won't charge anything additional. And then, if you can, then it's something that can be negotiated.
Yeah.
Um,
Or even photos first off are really good. If you can kind of take that out of the equation of all the post and things like that, just to see whether somebody's serious, or have like a rough price list written out. If it's a ring sizing or something, or a chain repair, have a rough price list, and generally they're quite straightforward. Um, or you could even have something on there that says, retipping, like the reclawing and things like that, and stone setting would need to be looked at further. And this is the process. You'd send it to me, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, it's just about communication.
Yeah. Everything is possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe that.
Um, thanks for the questions, guys. Helen says, please could you describe the process of a claw repair? I'm on the silver diploma. Whoop, whoop.
Mm.
And we haven't yet covered claw settings, but we will soon. I know a few people that have needed a claw repair to engagement rings, and I'm curious to know how it's repaired. Maybe you could guide us through like how you would, if that came onto your bench, what would be your process?
Yeah, so as I said before, so diamonds, rubies, and sapphires are generally okay to solder near. So if it was either any one of those, um, generally, if you felt comfortable and confident, you wouldn't have to remove the stone. Say we had a four claw ring, a classic solitaire, and one of the claws had kind of sheared off or the tip had sheared off. You basically just go back to thinking either, if you made it, you'd think, okay, what diameter wire, what width wire did I use? And the same, if you didn't make it, you just measure what width the wire is of the claw and the shape. Sometimes they're slightly flat. And basically just almost mimic and recreate the part that's missing. And it's a bit tricky. You have to. So I clean the piece first just to get rid of any muck and things because heat doesn't like that and it stinks. So beware. Clean your jewellery before you repair it. Yeah, and basically just pretend that you're kind of almost, I don't know, it's probably better for me to draw it actually. To
Go for it. Diagram
describe it.
time.
Um, this is often how I take it in a bit better if I just do a little drawing. Uh,
Yeah, I'm the same. Visual learners.
yeah,
You might want to make April's screen big as well. There's like
yeah, so that's a
under
good
view, there's speaker view and gallery view. So you
point.
can see her picture.
So this is from the side view, really blown up. So this is the existing claw coming up, and this is where your gemstone, the side of the gemstone, is sitting inside that claw, where initially, the original claw would have sat over like this. Basically, what you're getting is like a large piece of wire that is similar, if not slightly bigger width than the original, and laying it at the angle, just being sympathetic to the angle of the top of the gemstone or wherever you're needing to lay this, because it may be that it's come off from at the bottom, but it's very rare that you'd get one snap so low down. It's usually here where the gemstone is rubbing on the inside of the metal. So you basically, you can do it with some tweezers. You can hold that piece in your tweezers, and it's a bit of a juggling act, but torch in one hand, tweezers, apply your solder or sweat solder it onto the bottom of that new claw and offer up the heat. And it's a bit like if anyone here has done any of the diplomas or watched any of the Stelios's videos, he's kind of like a chuck it on there man, he'll kind of offer it up and it's a bit like that. So it is a bit of a balancing act. Another, again, I'll say, I mean, the laser welder, I only mention this is because I use it every day in repairs. So that's a quick new technology kind of way that you would end up adding claws on, especially around fragile stones or vulnerable stones. Um, yeah, and because you've got this great big chunk of metal on the top now, then you can go in and file it off and refine it back to this nice sort of rounded top or pointed claw, whatever shape the other ones are. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it really does. I think what it makes me think of is this idea that like it's all metal. And essentially what's the issue is there's not enough metal, so we add metal. And I think probably depending on the exact break, like you said, where you exactly add it will change. But like you mentioned, even if you add too much, at least then you've got too much and your problem is kind of whittling it away. So it's at the very fundamental level, it's like there's not enough, add more, and
Yeah,
then refine and kind of shape. And I think sometimes when we're learning jewelry making, we think of everything in projects because that's a really useful way to learn. But ultimately, when we break it down to the materials, it's just metal and it's missing. So we add more. But I imagine it's one of those things. I've not done repairs of claws, but I imagine it's one of those things that just it's good to do some practice runs and
absolutely.
maybe break some on purpose and kind of repair them and have a go. But it's definitely something that I'm sure you can grow in confidence with. And yeah.
Absolutely. It is practice. And I think also just to mention around that, you need to be quite confident in your torch control. Just because imagine this is actually applying to all jewelry repairs, because if this jewelry isn't yours and you don't know how it's been made, you won't know where all the solder joins are. So if you imagine heating something, just maybe forward think, just assess it when you get it and think, could there be a join up here? If I heat this, is this going to disturb the join, the existing join? So yeah, just quite focused, confident torch control for things like that.
Mm.
Um, and also as well, part of that, if it's anything other than ruby, sapphire, and diamond, unless you have the laser weld, you have to take the stone out. And again, like you said before, Jess, it's all metal, so it's trying to let's pretend that stone wasn't in there to begin with, and we're building it back up like a broken piece of pottery or something. We're putting a piece in that matches what it should have been before, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that one of the great things about repair work is it probably really builds your confidence as a jeweler as well, because you really think about not just how you make a piece, but how someone will have made the piece. Like you said, where are the solder joins? Like, where are the weaknesses and the strengths in this piece? What do I need to be aware of? So I imagine that it's, great work for kind of increasing your knowledge of jewelry and how different people make it as well. But I was thinking, you mentioned the laser welder a few times. Maybe it's worth mentioning what that is and how I know it's not everyone will have one, but if you are doing lots of repairs or if you guys ever open a shop or anything like that, this might be something that could bring in some income because it
Yeah.
increases, the speed of these kind of repairs. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah. So you can get all different ones, but the I'm sure people have seen around the little desktop ones, which I'd never know how to say if it's Dado or Dado, but basically it's a little box. I would show you, but I think I'll pull the plug out of my Mac. Um, it's a box desktop, and you basically sit and you put your arms or your hands into the laser welder with, say, you're doing a chain repair. You've put the links together, and you're using some tweezers to hold it nice and steady, and you're looking through like a microscope type lens. And what it does, it's got a foot pedal, a bit like a sewing machine. And you basically, every time you put your foot down on the foot pedal, it sends a little pulse, a little laser beam, basically. And it's just a pinpoint weld. So, imagine welding, like industrial welding. It's basically that, but like on a teeny tiny jewelry scale. So it's so helpful for getting into small areas. So most of the laser welders out there go to a zero point 0.2 mil spot size, which is really just so tiny. Um, yeah, and it basically welds the metal without any solder. You don't use any solder. Um, there's instances where you can build metal up. So with claw work, for example, um, you can basically introduce like fine wire and build it up. So it's really versatile. And I mean, it's not only just for repairs, but it's for I use it every day, almost in every project now, just for basically tacking bits together. You know that thing you do when you've got like five different pairs of tweezers holding up this one ring to put the collet on. Yeah, you can basically tack that in place, and it's a bit like super glue or something like that. It just keeps everything in place while you're doing it.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so if you are doing a high volume or just even a small volume of repairs, and it saves you so much time because of the accuracy of the pinpoint weld, and you don't have to send anything away, because if it was a pearl ring and you really wanted to repair it for your customer, it saves you taking the pearl out and having to redo it, or outsourcing, and posting it, sending these valuable things through the post. So that was one of the main reasons I got mine. But yeah, it's a great tool for kind of like that next level.
Mm.
You
Yeah, I
really
guess.
into it.
Yeah, I guess if repairs are going to be like a key part of your business, then
Yeah,
that's going to be a worthwhile investment. But like you said, you don't need one to get started with, and there's lots of things that you can do. I know
absolutely.
actually Alice, who's one of our diploma graduates from the silver diploma, has a shop, and she got one of them because she does repairs for people just coming in and out of the shop. So it's definitely something that is, works for some businesses.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's one of those things, once you have one, you're like, how did I live without
yeah.
one? But there's always more tools for things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And actually, you don't have to do much cleanup after the laser weld is involved, because if you're not heating the whole piece, you'd have to pickle it, you'd have to do all that. So yeah, I'm not like I'm not, what do you call it? I'm not on commission for this. I'm like mad. So
It's changed your life.
it has.
Yeah, but you built up to it. It wasn't, you've learned how to do them all by hand, and you've kind of gone through that process and then got to the stage where there was enough demand for it as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing about that. Um, Louisa asks, what are the ways to tell what the purity of metal is if it's unknown? For example, you can use the right solder? And Carol's got a very similar question, which says, how do you find out the quality of the metal if there are no hallmarks? Yeah, so any thoughts on
Excuse me while I bend over and
that?
so
Interactive, it's
yeah.
demonstration.
That's like an acid testing kit. So basically, what you do is, say if it was a wedding ring, you would get your little needle file or something similar. I mean, some of the kits have files included. You can't see that really, but you basically just file into an area, like a fairly discreet area. You don't want to do it right on top. And then these come in different. Um, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not very good at it.
Different colors,
They come in different
different color
colours, yes.
bottles.
So this red bottle is for silver. So if you were thinking, is this silver plated or is it genuinely, sterling silver, you would dab that on and it would turn a certain color. So it's a chemical reaction. And the same with the golds, specifically 9 carat, 14 to 22. And then there's another bottle for steel and platinum. So yeah, it comes with like a little instruction, or sort of, this is what this means. But basically it just changes color on the metal surface, and it will tell you then it's process of elimination. And certainly over time you'll really get a feel for it. um, you'll sort of look at something and go, that's probably 18 carat over 9. But yeah, that is a really great kit if you're unsure. And can't remember who asked the question, but like they said, then you know what solder to use. So
Yes,
good
yeah.
question. Yeah.
And does that damage the piece at all, or is it just changes color?
No, so obviously where you're filing, it's always good to make the customer aware that you're going to do that, because there is going to be a file mark inside. And if it's like if you're really unsure and you're like, I don't even know if this is gold, but the customer said this is gold, it feels odd to me. Um, Sometimes you can get, obviously, you can get gold plated, you can get gold filled. Um, so I mean, you can get fakes as well. So you have to do quite a deep-ish file mark, maybe sort of, I don't know, half mil to a mil, just to make sure you get through any plating or any. Some things have cores inside them as well. So just make sure that you're quite thorough with it, but let the customer know. And then you can always just buff it out afterwards with some sandpaper. Um, yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it comes back to that communication, doesn't it? Of it doesn't have a hallmark, we don't know what it is. I can do a testing on it, but it will cause, a little bit. I will need to do some work on it, and it may be that it's gold plated, and then the plating's gone, and
Yeah. If
so
it's plated, it does this really fun, like fuzzy, like green, like crazy science thing. So yeah, and then you're like, okay, it's not gold. So it's quite clear when it's not gold, which is quite fun. Maybe not
yeah.
fun for the customer, but yeah,
I guess most of the time, if they're wanting to test if it's gold, it's because they probably want to melt it down. So they need to know, don't they, really? Unless they really want to keep, because usually they don't want to keep the piece. They want to melt it down. They need to know if it's gold. So the worst case scenario, it's gold plated and you scratch it and it's like, well, it
yeah,
wasn't gold anyway. So
yeah, that's it. Or it's yeah, or if you think if it's like a sizing or something and it actually turns out it's silver with the gold plate on top, then again, communication, you just say, oh gosh, I know you thought this was gold, but actually it's silver underneath, and I've discovered that from doing this test. We can still size it, but it means it'll take the plating off from where we've done the repair, or you can have it replated again. So there's always an answer.
yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Yvonne asked, would you mind sharing which laser welder you use? I know you mentioned the branding. I don't know if there's a special like.
Oh, I'm not going to turn it. It's called I think it's called Dado or Dado, Dado, and it's, I believe this one's a 2.0, but the company I think is called Freeform Fabrication, and they do all sorts. So, but that little one is perfect just for desktop.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Yes. Awesome. Helen says that's great, thank you. And she loved the diagram. It makes it much easier. That was back to the claw.
Yeah, good.
So, and Jessica says, with repair work like the broken claw example, is it better to have a more precise torch like a little smith's, or is a hand torch fine for the job? What are
Um,
your thoughts on torches and repair?
I think once you get to, because claw work tends to be, I think if it's your own jewelry and you're experimenting, I think that's okay, to kind of see how you feel with your sort of hand torch. But maybe my suggestion would be, once you get to the more sort of experience level where you are doing claw work on other people's jewelry, I would personally advise maybe something a bit more precise, like a little smith. That's what I've got. Because you can get the really fine nibs, and also it's just peace of mind that you're not going to be touching anything else, like we said before, solder joins and things like that. So it does give you a bit more precision. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? Like it's almost easier to make the piece sometimes than to do the repair of the piece because
yeah,
it's even finer because you're not just creating a claw, you're creating like maybe one third of a claw
yeah,
while the stone's there and attaching it. So it's like really, really detailed, which doesn't mean it's not achievable, but it's just there's some additional considerations.
yeah, yeah,
And the order is skewed, isn't it, with repairs? Because when you're
yeah.
making, you like, well, we don't set the stone until all the solder is done. And whereas with repairs, obviously, you don't have those kind of luxuries.
And it's sort of that problem solving element, isn't it? And the forward thinking, and what tools will make my life, or this repair a little bit easier. for myself, but also the piece of jewelry, that because you've got to be really sensitive to that piece of jewelry, and like we said, what life it's had, who, where, how it's been made, how it's been worn, and all that sort of thing. So
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a few specific questions. Louise asked, what's the metal testing kit called, please?
I know this one's on Cousins, and it's just I, I don't think it's got a name. I think it's just if you type that into Cousins' website. Otherwise, I know Cooksons do them as well, and they're something like an acid testing kit or something, or metal testing kit. That will come up.
Yeah, metal test, acid testing, metal purity.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah. They've all got different names. It's interesting in the jewelry industry, like I feel it's quite a recent thing for things to have names.
Mm.
In the past, like when I've worked with jewelers who maybe started like 30, 40, 50 years ago, they're just like, this is a pusher. And a
Yeah,
pusher is about 50 different things. And you're
yeah,
like, which pusher? What that like one of them's tiny, one of them's huge, one of them like they look totally different. And it's like the language of jewelry has is still quite new. So on a lot of these tool websites, you kind of end up putting in like three different things before you're like, okay, I think I've got the right thing now.
yeah.
Uh,
That's it. That probably would have just been called acid or something vague.
yeah.
So yeah.
And then pickle used to be acid as well, and then etching is acid. It's like, which acid?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all part of the fun of exploring. Brilliant. And Anna's posted some links as well to some of the things that we've been talking about, which is great. Thanks, Anna. Karen asked, when enlarging or reducing a ring, how do you know if the main design will be affected? Oh, it's an interesting one.
So that is a good question. If anybody wants to go back to the Jeweller's Retreat, I do a little demo on there for wedding rings, don't I, Jess? Of the
Yeah,
ring stretcher and compressor, which is great. That's really good for wedding rings and plain rings without any shape, so no kind of like wishbones or chevrons or anything like that. Um, and that's usually 1 to 2 sizes. You can stretch and compress. That means you don't have to solder anything. Yeah,
yeah,
so
we love stretching and resizing things without any design on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If it's engraved, that can also be a nice way to do it. If it's only one size, maybe two, because again, you're not cutting through an engraving. But again, communication piece. If it's got engraving all the way around it, for example, and the customer needs like 6 sizes or whatever putting in, it's just saying, okay, obviously I've got to cut through this, put a plain piece of metal into this to make it the right size. Obviously, you could leave it like that if you want to, or I can then quote to put a matching or similar engraving on that blank piece if you would like. So it's all about options as well. Um, Stone set pieces do not stretch on the ring stretch because they'll all go ping. So it's that is about putting pieces in, putting pieces of metal in. So once you've opened it up, but in terms of not affecting the design, what you're trying to do, imagine like this bit is the top of the ring. So we've got a solitaire or like a 3 stone, maybe with some diamond shoulders or something. Um, you don't really want to touch this top 50%, really, if you can help it. You probably will have to a bit if it's going up quite a bit because you're trying to open. If you think about your ring mandrel, it's obviously circular, so you need to make the whole ring kind of open out. But yeah, if it's something with an intricate design on top, you don't really want to be touching that too much. Some rings are also hollowed out underneath that section. So again, that's a no-go to try and stay away from that. So really it kind of leaves you this bottom section. And if it's going up like a lot, it's just explaining to them that you can't really touch that top part. And it may just come out that the ring's slightly oval in shape. But again, you're going to do your best to make it fit and comfortable for the customer. I mean, there are other more advanced things you can do. but there's always risk with stone set pieces that stones may um, dislodge, because you're moving them about and shifting them about. So again, communicate that to the customer. Say, of course, we can size this up 6 sizes, but it may put risk to the stones. So just let you know. And if anything happens, we can let you know and quote from there. So I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. And like, yeah, it's also working out what you're comfortable with as well, isn't it? I think especially as kind of handmade designers, and often we have like a good rapport with our customers. It's not, I think it's often a slightly different to the high street where people walk in and it's like, you kind of just want to say yes to everything. I think sometimes we're like, well, I can do a few sizes, but if it's too many sizes, we might make a different suggestion, like maybe I can remake the ring or because the other thing I would ask is like, why does it need to go up that many sizes? Like, has it been maybe 20 years since they bought it and maybe they want a different design now? So sometimes we were talking about this before, weren't we, April? This idea of like sometimes people come in with one idea, but actually when you get talking to them and you realize they don't know what's possible, and they might be like, actually, I really would like that redesigned in a way that suits me better now that I'm, a little bit older or whatever it is, and my taste might have changed. So it's amazing what kind of things can come out. I remember I had a friend who had her engagement ring resized, and they just said like, we're only doing like 1 or 2 sizes up and down, and anything else we just no thank you.
That's it. Set boundaries for yourselves and um, just know that you're confident in what you're going to offer your customer. And if you feel that maybe isn't something you feel comfortable with, just let them know that and just say, unfortunately, I can't do this. But if you can offer another option, like you said, Jess, and then that's obviously always great. To be honest, sometimes if I've got too much work on, or it's not something I really want to do, I'll just recommend another jeweler. So there's always that as well. You can always recommend someone else.
Absolutely, yes. Just because you choose to do repairs, it doesn't mean you have to do every repair.
Yeah,
Especially if you're dipping your toe in and you're starting, you want to build your confidence and have some good experiences. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Even start with friends and family. Actually,
Mm.
you might say that might be one way to do it.
Yeah. If they're nice,
Yeah,
depends. Could be the worst.
yeah, that's true.
Kind friends, kind family.
Mm.
Um, Heather asks, what tip do you use for the Little Smith's torch, please, for prongs? Yeah, because we're talking about the finer tips. I don't know if there's one that you'd recommend.
I think I usually stick with a 5 on it as an average overall, but the smallest one, I believe, is potentially a 4. 7 I use for like melting or annealing big stuff.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's a 4 which is really teeny tiny, and there's a 3 as well. But I've got one of the oxygen cylinders. So with your little torch, you obviously need your gas and your oxygen. And the smallest nozzle, the number 3, just doesn't seem to like the oxygen, so it just blows out. So I use a 4, and that's absolutely fine. And it's often just about kind of like heating things up from the side. So like, don't go all in on the claw and next to the stone. Kind of like, as wave it on and heat it up gently, and everything will get warm, and then it will do what you want it to do.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I find those really specific things like asking jewelers exactly what they're using so helpful because there's so much general information, but actually, even though we all do it differently, it's really nice sometimes to know like, oh, okay, that's what works for you, and kind of really useful guiding point. So thank you, April. Anna's put a link to the metal testing kit in the chat. And Karen said, search for Troy testing kits for testing metals. Thank you, Karen. Super useful. Wendy said Otto Frey as well has them. And Anna's also put a link to April's episode in the Jewelers Retreat. So if you do want to check out she does a full demonstration, which we filmed somewhere in the middle of the episode, I think. But watch the whole episode. It's fun. About using a ring stretcher or reducer, which is a bit of kit that you might invest in if you're doing repairs as well, or even if you're just making and selling wedding engagement rings, because I think people's fingers do change over the years, over decades. Sometimes even if they get pregnant, they get bigger and then they get smaller, and there's all sorts of things. So it's a nice thing to be able to offer your customers that you can make. It's usually, I think, just one or two sizes, isn't it, with changing most of the time. Just a small adjustment.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or even if you accidentally make something like half a size too small and you go, damn it. You go, hang on, I can use my stretcher. It's just really handy for everything. Yeah, in that
yeah.
respect. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned as well that it's just very good for making it exactly round too.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah. Sorry, I feel like I'm adding all these
All
things.
the tools you need to buy. Yeah, but I think there's lots of things. I think a good place to start is to set yourself some repair jobs to, make a ring and then try and make it one size exactly smaller and one
Yeah.
size exactly bigger, and set yourself these little challenges to build your confidence so that when you are doing it with someone's gold or because usually that's the other thing in this shop I was in. I don't know how you feel about this, April, but they just say if it's silver, we don't repair it, which
Okay.
I thought was interesting. But I think it's because what they're saying is the cost of repairing, it's going to be a minimum like 50 to £100 usually for most repair jobs. And if it's silver, it's just you could buy it again. Um,
See,
yeah, I don't know what
my this is probably just my values though, and the work I create. I would always offer it as a service, but that's just me as a person trying to help someone out. And I do think if they, there's always a price tag in terms of, you're not trying to overcharge somebody. It's just again about honesty and saying this is how much it's going to cost because it's going to take me this much time. And if someone really wants it repaired, then let them have it repaired and they can pay whatever it's going to cost. So I think, and if somebody really doesn't, if they sort of go, oh gosh, £30, and then okay, that's fine. You don't want it done. So yeah, it's
um,
I like to if somebody asks me, I like to give them a price and then yeah, they can choose then.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're right. It's kind of the values around not, reusing things. And repurposing is the other option as well. It might not be that it ends up as a repair. It might be something turning into something else. And the kind of sentimental value that people have with things is they might be willing to pay perhaps more than makes logical sense just based on the metal. Because it's something that's been in their family for generations, so on and so forth. So that makes sense. We are coming to the end, but I had just one last thing that I wanted us to touch on, which we've kind of been coming to anyway, is around pricing. So we've been talking about repairs and things. How do you quote for repairs? I imagine it can be quite complex, but what's your basic kind of starting point if someone were to ask you to
Yeah.
do something and you put a quote together? What would be your thought process behind that?
So this is just the way I've learned kind of I apprenticed in jewelry workshops and started with repairs and things like that. And the way that we've always done it in various different workshops I've worked in is mainly on a time basis. So think of your rate per hour because it mostly is time, but then obviously if you've got a ring sizing that needs to go up 6 sizes and it's 18 karat gold, um, it will just be looking at any materials that are needed or a clasp that's come off a chain and it's 9 karat gold. It's just adding it on. So I would structure it as thinking about how much time it's going to take. Generally, I'd probably add about 10% on um, to my kind of I can't remember what I wrote on here. Yeah. So working on a time basis per hour, plus around about 10% or so for like solder and consumables and things like that. So um, often I think we forget about those things. So it's good to think about that. Um, and then adding on any additional materials, but also a nice thing to do, especially now when the gold price is kind of going a bit crazy. It's going up a lot with, jumping in within a few days. You can just give a bracket price and just say, okay, I've said it'll probably take an hour to do this. So say you charge £30, £40, something like that. And then for example, you might say, okay, well, it's going to be between 30 and £40 or something like that. So, or again, 100 to 200, that's not even a crazy bracket. It probably sounds like, how can you say £100 difference? But it's justified in that gold price. And also, sometimes you'll think, okay, it might take half an hour, but actually takes more towards an hour. So you're giving yourself a bit of wiggle room. And again, that's communicating that to the customer. So if someone says, why can't you just give me a fixed price? I would say, well, it's a complex repair. So I've estimated it will take this long. So that's generally how I price repairs.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a nice one for us to end on. But yeah, thank you so much, April, for coming and sharing some of your knowledge. I think it's so helpful, especially for people who've never done a repairs before and don't know about that side of the industry. There's so much we can learn, and I guess we learn so much by doing them as well, and doing practice pieces, and then having, like you said, building up our confidence, starting with friendly customers, friends and family, and then stretching out to strangers and repairing their things. But yes, thank you guys all so much for being here as well. April, if people want to just come and check you out, and if they've not met you before, come and follow you on social media, where's the best place to find you online?
Yeah, so Instagram is the place for me, and that is at April Dace Jewellery. So hopefully my name comes up full here, but my surname is spelled Dace for anybody that's wondering. Yeah, so April Dace Jewellery is where I am mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Give April a follow if you haven't already on social media, and you can see some of her beautiful jewelry there as well. And I know a lot of you guys are our current students, but if anybody is new and would like to develop your jewelry making skills, we have lots of courses on at Jewelers Academy, which we'd love you to get involved in. Diploma programs if you're looking to kind of upskill and train at different levels. So you can check those out on our website. And if you have any questions, you can always drop us a message. We're everywhere. We're on social media, we're on emails, we're on all the digital things. And thank you so much, Anna, for being in the chat and helping out. Lovely to see you guys, and we'll see you on another Bench Tips very soon.